Welcome, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Law of Self-Defense Show. I am, of course, attorney Andrew Branca for Law of Self-Defense. Thank you. Thank you. Always such kind praise. Such kind praise. Greatly, greatly appreciated. Let's see. Shut off my notifications here. Get ready to focus all our attention on this show. Very, very nice. I did have a very kind message come in last night. Let's see if I can share that with everybody. There's an easy way to do that over Twitter, and it's this kind of thing that makes it all worthwhile, folks. Let me pop this open real quick to share it with all of you. Let's see. Here we go. A tweet came in last night, and actually came in by another means, but I shared it on Twitter last night. One of our members wrote, I subscribe to a lot of things, business, investment, self-defense, survival, and your content is like any other. I learn more from your shows, blogs, and anywhere else. Your comments are actionable and relevant to the world I live in. I have a home in, and I redacted that, but spend most of my time at a primary residence in Northern Redacted. Just wanted to thank you for the great product and encourage your continued business growth and success. Very, very kind. Very kind. Very much appreciated. All right, folks, we're going to start today's show. We have five use of force videos we're going to cover today, as described in the description. The first three of those will be open access. So we should be streaming just about everywhere right now. Let me refresh that. Make sure everything is working the way it should be. How about our members? Everything working there? Yes, it is. Rumble, YouTube. So the first three videos we'll do will be open access. They're streaming on YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, and of course, to our Law of Self-Defense members. The last two videos are actual shooting videos where people are shot, at least one of them apparently killed. And I just don't stream those on YouTube anymore because I just get them monetized. So when we finish the first three videos, which don't involve death, we will end the open access portion of the show, and the remainder of the show will be available only to Law of Self-Defense members. The good news is that being a Law of Self-Defense member is dirt cheap, especially if you just want to try it out. Try it out for 2 weeks. Unlimited access to all our members-only content for just 99 cents, folks. That is thousands of blog posts, videos, podcasts, plain English legal analysis of use of force events, use of force trial coverage, answering Q&A from our members, and much, much more. Unlimited access for 99 cents for 2 weeks. And after the 2 weeks, folks, it's still dirt cheap. It's only about 30 cents a day, less than $10 a month to be a Law of Self-Defense member. But you can get the 2-week trial at lawofselfdefense.com/trial. Do it right now. And you get the benefit of also being able to enjoy the members-only portion of today's show, where we cover that use of force event. I should also mention one of the most recent benefits of membership that we've added are transcripts. We now have written transcripts of each of our shows. We've done that retroactively back to June 1st, the start of this month, and we're doing it with each new show that we do. So to illustrate how this would work, we did a show just about a week ago about a Florida court decision. Let's see if I can make this a little bigger so it's a little easier to read. Let's see. And of course, if you go to our blog post, you'll see the post there. We have a little description. We have the video, the replay of the show, all 1 hour, 45 minutes of it. It's like a movie, a full-length movie, stuff we're promoting in the moment. And then you get to the bottom and we have the transcript. And the transcript is very long. It's a transcript of the entire hour and 45 minutes. We also have it in PDF form, so you can download it as a PDF document. This one happens to be, is 30 pages. Is that it says? 30 pages long. And we do this to encourage you to download it as documentation of what you learned in this class, so that your knowledge, your specialized knowledge that you acquire by being a law self-defense member, that you can prove should you ever rely on that knowledge in an act of self-defense. And you need that knowledge admitted to the jury so that they can understand why your use of force decisions were reasonable decisions. You need to be able to show the court that you possess that specialized knowledge at the time or before you acted in self-defense. And the only way to do that is to document what you've learned. So we're making these PDFs available only to our members at lawofselfdefense.com on the member blog post. We also include in those transcripts whatever content we're referencing in the show that we think would be necessary or useful. For example, this show covers this Supreme Court decision out of Florida, so we include the link to the actual decision. Whoops, that's not quite right there. Let's see. Well, I'll have to fix that PDF. But it'll go to this decision, Burns v. State, so you can read the actual decision. And we'll actually be circling back to that decision here in today's show in one of the videos we'll be covering. Again, be a law self-defense member. Dirt cheap. It's only 99 cents to try it out for 2 weeks, folks. Less than $10 a month to be a standard member. So I encourage you to take a look at that. And now let's go ahead and launch the substance of today's show. Here we go. All right, so 5 videos to cover today, 3 open access. The last 2, the shooting videos, will be members only after we cut off the YouTube, Rumble, and Twitter screens. Let's take a look at the first of these. This is just an opportunity to do a straight up traditional 5 elements of self-defense legal analysis. By the way, if you're not familiar with the 5 elements of self-defense, these are the foundation, the building blocks of any claim of justified use of force. The good news is there's not 500 elements. There's not 50 elements. There's only 5, up to 5 elements that you need to worry about in a claim of self-defense or defense of others: innocence, imminence, proportionality, avoidance, and reasonableness. We have this cheat sheet we give away for free, folks. It describes each of those 5 elements briefly. We give it away. It's just a PDF download. You can get this at lawofselfdefense.com/elements. If you don't understand these 5 elements, you can't possibly understand where the legal boundaries are for the use of force in defense of yourself or defense of other people. So if you do nothing else, I urge you to get this little cheat sheet for absolutely free. You might also take the next step and get the actual book, Law of Self-Defense Principles. We do give this away. You can buy it on Amazon. Check out the reviews on Amazon, 5-star rated, something like 1,400 reviews. But don't buy it on Amazon. They'll charge you for the book and the shipping and handling. We only ask you to cover the cost of shipping the book to you. We give you the book for free, real physical book, folks, not just some ebook. You can get this at lawofselfdefense.com/free book. It explains the 5 elements and a lot more in much greater detail, obviously, than we can do on a cheat sheet. So that's lawofselfdefense.com/free book. So this is a chance. This video captures a chance to do a straightforward 5 elements of self-defense type of legal analysis. Now, this event actually takes place, I believe it's in Spain, but it doesn't matter. We'll pretend that it's in some jurisdiction in the U.S. and do our legal analysis accordingly. So what we have here is, it looks just to be like a panhandler here in some city street. He's asking for money. It's a little hard to understand exactly what he's saying because of the accents. Sounds like he's asking for $100 or 100 euros. And he's rather insistent. And then he produces a knife. And we'll take the video forward from there. Here we go. There's a knife.
No. Lo saqué. Surprise, motherfucker.
All right. So what do we have here? We have a use of what appears to be OC spray straight to the face, right there. Now, let's take a look at our 5 elements of self-defense law legal analysis. The first element is innocence. What does innocence mean? It means you're not the initial physical aggressor in the conflict. Is it Italy? Perhaps it's Italy here. My mistake. It's definitely Europe, because Europe uses those weird cylinders that rise out of the street to block vehicular traffic. They had those in the Netherlands too when I lived there. Yeah, I don't speak Italian though, folks. I just eat the food. So innocence, meaning you were not the initial physical aggressor in the confrontation. This starts off with a conversation, right? No one's threatening or using force until somebody is. Who's the first person to threaten or use force in this engagement? Well, it's the panhandler here, right? He produces the knife. So on the side of the defender, the element of innocence, checked off. Next is the element of imminence. Is the threat you're defending yourself against either actually occurring or immediately about to occur? It's not some past threat that's over. It's not some speculative future threat that may never happen. The threat is imminent. And a great way to evaluate imminence is using something called the AOJ triad: ability, opportunity, jeopardy. This is often taught as if it's the entirety of a self-defense claim. It's not. It's one of the 5 elements. It's the element of imminence. But in the context of evaluating imminence, AOJ is extremely helpful. So A stands for ability. Does the party you're defending yourself against have the ability to cause harm? Now, everybody has some ability to cause harm, right? We have fists, we have feet, if nothing else. So the real question for ability is not so much can they cause harm, but do they have the ability to cause only non-deadly force harm, or do they have the ability to cause deadly force harm? Well, here, of course, the panhandler produces a knife. A knife is capable of causing deadly force harm. So we have ability, deadly force. O is opportunity. Do they not only have the ability, but do they have the opportunity to bring it to bear? If this person with the knife was 100 yards away, they have ability, but they wouldn't have opportunity to immediately bring that ability to bear. But of course, here he's only a few feet away. And the relevant distance for a contact weapon like a knife or a club or a fist is commonly referred to as the Tueller drill distance. Dennis Tueller, Salt Lake City police officer, a trainer for his department, wanted to know at what point someone with a contact weapon, a suspect with a contact weapon, could be inflicting harm on his officers before the officer could respond in self-defense. This is really a question of, well, how much distance can they cross before my officers can get their guns out? And that distance he calculated to be about 21 feet. So in theory, the person with the contact weapon, if they're more than 21 feet away, not yet has the opportunity to bring it to bear. If they're within 21 feet, they do have the opportunity. Obviously, this dude with the knife is well within 21 feet, so we check off opportunity. Jeopardy. Someone can have opportunity, ability and opportunity and not be an imminent threat. If you're walking by a uniformed police officer, he's got a gun on his belt. He's got ability, he's got opportunity, but there's no indication of jeopardy. Jeopardy meaning, is the person conducting themselves in such a way that a reasonable defender would perceive them as intending to bring that ability and opportunity to bear on an innocent person. A cop just standing there with his gun holstered is not evidencing jeopardy. This guy is evidencing jeopardy in a number of ways. Of course, he got the gun out, the knife out in the first place. But what else is he doing? He's pursuing the retreating defender, right? So is that an indication of jeopardy? An indication of an intent to bring the ability and opportunity to bear? Sure it is. So we have ability, opportunity, jeopardy. That means we have the element of imminence. So that's innocence, imminence. 3 more elements left. The next is proportionality. We've kind of already covered that. Proportionality has to do with the degree of the threat you're defending yourself against. There's really 2 buckets of intensity of threat. One is non-deadly force. The other is deadly force. As a general matter, if you're only facing a non-deadly force threat, you can only use non-deadly force in self-defense. You can't use deadly force in self-defense until you're facing a deadly force threat. Here, what are we facing? Well, the knife is clearly a deadly force threat. Deadly force being defined to mean both force that can cause death and force that can cause serious bodily injury. Of course, here a knife could cause either, right? Death or serious bodily injury. I've worked a number of cases where people are killed by a single quick stab wound to the chest with a not very big knife. It snips the aorta or chamber of the heart, and that's it. That person's, they're not dead instantly, but they're dead pretty quick, usually in a very messy fire hose of blood kind of way. So clearly we're facing a deadly force threat here. Now, I mentioned if you're only facing a non-deadly force threat, you can only use non-deadly force in self-defense. But of course, you're always privileged to use less force than the law would allow. So here the defender is facing a deadly force threat. That would privilege him to use deadly force in self-defense. This is in Italy, I guess. So presumably the defender wouldn't have the option of having a gun, maybe not even a knife on his person to defend himself with deadly force. But if you're allowed to use deadly force, you're certainly allowed to use force less than deadly force, to use non-deadly force. And here, of course, the defender is using, assuming this is pepper spray, non-deadly force in self-defense. So that addresses the element of proportionality. What about the element of avoidance? Avoidance has to do with whether or not there is a generalized legal duty to retreat before you can use force in self-defense, usually only before you can use deadly force in self-defense. So there's only in the US 11 states that impose this generalized legal duty to retreat before you can defend yourself. Most of them impose that duty only before you use deadly force. You're not required to retreat before you use non-deadly force. You're also not required to retreat if it's not possible to do so with complete safety. So you're not required to increase your jeopardy in an effort to retreat. So there's many levels on which avoidance probably would not apply here. One is that if this were in the US, in 39 states, there is no legal duty to retreat. Even if there is, deadly defensive force is not being used. So it wouldn't trigger the legal duty to retreat, even in the 11 states that do impose that generally. And in any case, safe retreat is not really possible here. You can't turn your back on someone a couple feet away with a knife and attempt to run before they can have the knife in your back. So you'd be increasing your jeopardy. You wouldn't be required to execute on that legal duty. So avoidance is taken care of, even if it would apply. Also, we then get to reasonableness. Reasonableness has two facets. One is subjective, the other is objective. Subject is, do you genuinely believe that you need to use force in self-defense? Well, I think we can't mind read, right? So, but we have to use our judgment. This would certainly give rise, in my mind, to a subjective belief that I needed to defend myself from a knife attack. The other half of reasonableness, and you need both of these, is objective reasonableness. Would a reasonable and prudent person in the same circumstances have shared that genuine good faith subjective belief in the need to act in self-defense? In other words, the fear or the perception of the need to act in self-defense, the apprehension, I should say, fear is not really the right word, the apprehension of the threat needs to be reasonable, not speculative or irrational. So it's not a case here where the defender simply has an irrational fear of people who dress like clowns in white. There's a reasonably perceived threat here, which is, of course, the knife. But it could be things like a fake gun, a shiny object that looks like a knife, maybe isn't a knife. As long as the threat is reasonably perceived, that's sufficient. Now, we talk about these 5 elements. And of course, it's not actually required that the defender prove any of these. The burden is on the state to disprove one of these beyond a reasonable doubt. Any one, however. These are cumulative. So unless an element is waived for some reason, it's a required element, and all the required elements are required. So the state does not have to disprove your claim of self-defense in its entirety. They have to disprove any one of the required elements of self-defense. If they do that, your claim of self-defense collapses completely. Inversely, if there's at least a reasonable doubt in the minds of the juror that these have not been disproven, then they're present. So the jury could believe it's 70% likely what you did was not actually in self-defense, but That's not the legal requirement. The legal requirement is it doesn't have to be disproven by 70%. It has to be disproven by beyond any reasonable doubt. So unless the state does that, and let's pretend that's 90%, 95% disprove, then you're justified in your use of force. So here we clearly have every one of those 5 elements. We have innocence. This dude is the aggressor, the guy being sprayed. We have imminence. The attack is taking place right now, or the stabbing is immediately about to take place. We have AOJ. We have proportionality. This is a deadly force attack, which would have privileged this defender in the US to use deadly force in self-defense. If you're coming at me with a knife from a few feet away, it's highly likely that my pistol's coming into play. Deadly force attack, I'd privilege to use deadly force in self-defense. Of course, if you're privileged to use deadly force, you're privileged to use less, like the OC spray being here. So proportionality is satisfied. Avoidance, normally not required in America in otherwise lawful cases of self-defense, but even where it is required, only required generally before you use deadly force in self-defense, which isn't happening here, and not required if it's not safely possible to retreat. Again, we have avoidance checked off here. Reasonableness, we have to make inferences about a person's actual mental state. We don't have mind-reading machines. Certainly this defender would say, I was in fear of harm. That's why I defended myself. And that fear would be objectively reasonable given what we're seeing here, the knife in hand, the pursuit by Mr. White Clown here. So lawful self-defense based on actual law, folks. And if you go to your own state's self-defense law statutes or case law, you will find, once you know what these elements are, you will recognize them in your statutes and see they're there. It's the same fundamental 5-element framework in all 50 states, folks. The biggest variance being whether or not that element of avoidance is required. Again, there's only 11 states that really impose that in otherwise lawful cases of self-defense. All right, that's what I wanted to share with this video. Let me take a look, see if there's any questions. By the way, another benefit of membership in Law of Self-Defense is it is only Law of Self-Defense members who get their comments and questions addressed by me during these live shows or during the replay shows by putting their comments or questions in the chat. I don't bother looking at the YouTube comments or the Rumble comments or the Twitter comments. It's just too cumbersome, folks. So if you're interested in that, being able to ask me questions, make comments, have me address them in real time during the show, you need to be a Law of Self-Defense member. Again, 2-week trial, 99 cents at lawofselfdefense.com/trial. After that, it's about 30 cents a day, less than $10 a month to be a member. Okay, let's see. Let's look through the chat. Miles asks, Branca, is Branca a shortened version of your ancestral family name? Why the long sound in Branca? Yes, it is. So our name in Italy was Brancaccio. Brancaccio. But when we got to Ellis Island, they wrote the first 6 letters, and I guess they ran out of ink, or they didn't want to be bothered anymore. I do have a few relatives who in recent years have actually undergone a legal name change back to Brancaccio. That's why I don't mind how people pronounce it, Branca or Branca, because Branca, like bank, is how most Americans pronounce it, mostly how I pronounce it. But if you were paying attention to the original Italian name, it would be the longer A, Brancaccio. Let's see. Jeffrey says, platinum package just arrived. I can't wait to get home and open it up. Yeah, folks. So we have a very special offer we're currently running beyond our standard membership. We call it our platinum offer. So platinum members are the only people who are eligible for our legal consult, our professional expert legal consult. If they're involved in a use of force event, we consult with your attorney. We'll testify as an expert witness at your trial. We provide your attorney with 100, 200-page legal analysis of the use of force issues in your case. And we almost always get the charges dismissed before the platinum member ever faces the prospect of going to trial. But if you do go to trial, we're there to support you as well. Again, provide expert witness testimony, legal analysis. If heaven forbid you're convicted and are appealing, we're there for your appeal as well. If heaven forbid you get a hung jury and the prosecutor decides he's going to try you again, we're there for the second trial again, making sure that your legal team isn't dropping any balls. All the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed, that you're getting the most perfect legal defense available. We used to do these for anybody who could come up with a retainer of $10,000 or more, but we don't take outside consults anymore. We only provide these for our platinum members, and they get it for free. So the offer we have here is 5 years of platinum membership. So you're covered for 5 years. Plus, we'll send you about $3,000 of our law self-defense educational courses, books. We have our full-day course, your choice of 3 state-specific courses for state-specific law, our defense of property course, defense against riot, looting, and arson course, how to choose a self-defense insurance company course, multiple copies of our book in every form, audiobook, ebook, video book, 2 tickets. By the way, this platinum coverage also covers your spouse. No additional charge for that. So your spouse is covered for 5 years too. And each of you gets a ticket to our next live full-day Law of Self-Defense advanced class. You pick the date from the ones that are coming up. All of that is about $6,000 worth of value, and we're making it available for 82 cents a day. Is all of that worth 82 cents a day? A lot of people think yes. Obviously, is it Jeffrey here said yes. So he signed up. So he's getting a big package full of DVDs of all the courses, every course we do. He's also gotten instant online access to the streamed version of all those courses as well. But the big box of DVDs and the books, the physical books are, I guess, arrived today. So he'll get to open it up today. If you'd like to learn more about this opportunity, just need to point your browser to lawofselfdefense.com/82 cents. So we don't charge you 82 cents every day for 5 years, right? That's just the cost distributed. If you want to pay once upfront, I believe it's $1,500. But we also have payment plans, 3-month plans, 6-month plans. It's all described there at lawofselfdefense.com/82 cents. Let's see. Miles says, a knife at arm's distance, I would have shot him. Yeah, I think so. Certainly my gun would have come into play. Then you evaluate where things are. But if he's continuing to follow me as I'm backing off, things getting loud is pretty likely at that point. By the way, is it prudent for the defender here to be backing up like this? I think so, unless there's a good reason why you can't. For a number of reasons, it may deter the person. They may not want to follow you, especially if you're shouting commands at them not to follow. By the way, if you're shouting commands, don't follow me, and they continue to follow you, is that jeopardy in the AOJ triad? Is that a contributor to a reasonable perception of an imminent threat? Absolutely. Again, I've said this often. I don't believe the real value of verbal commands is that the other person will obey your commands. You have no control over that, whether they're going to obey. But I think the real value of verbal commands is to strip any ambiguity out of the scenario. Right. So it may be ambiguous about what's going on. People often get in trouble in ambiguous situations. They're scared, but they're not sure what's going on. They don't want to have to shoot someone if they don't really need to shoot someone, all the legal hassle, all of that. They don't want to take a human life unnecessarily if it can be avoided. But you can strip away a lot of ambiguity using commands, verbal commands. So if you're shouting at someone to stay away and they keep coming closer, well, then there's no ambiguity about that anymore. Let's see. The backing up. So the backing up is useful because it creates distance. Distance gives you more options. It gives you more time, right, to make decisions. It also looks good. So obviously people are going to be witnessing this event, especially if you're shouting verbal commands. What do we all do when we hear somebody shouting? We turn our head to see what's going on. So normally good guy cases of self-defense, you want more witnesses if you know what you're doing. So you can be confident your use of force is going to be as far inside the legal boundaries as possible. You want witnesses who'll tell the cops, who'll testify at trial, you were backing away from the fight. You certainly don't look like you're the initial aggressor in the fight if you're backing away. Indeed, the other person following you looks like they are what they are, the initial aggressor in the confrontation. So backing up is good for tactical reasons, also for legal reasons, because it contributes to your narrative of innocence in the case. Let's see. Tony says the problem with OC is that it usually takes a lot longer to present, especially in the face of deadly force. In this case, luckily, it was only used a threat instead of attacking. Right. So I carry pepper spray, folks. I'm a big fan of pepper spray because I want to have a non-deadly defensive tool available to me. I carry a gun for when a gun is necessary, but often a gun's not necessary. Right. If you look at the FBI Department of Justice statistics, you're 5 times more likely to be facing a non-deadly force threat against which your gun's not a lawful response than you are a deadly force threat. So you need some non-deadly defensive force. I like pepper spray. That said, pepper spray is not magic, and its effectiveness is highly varied, and how long it takes to kick in and be effective is highly varied. So it may well not work. There are circumstances where it may not be appropriate. So here, for example, I don't think I would go to pepper spray here against a deadly force attack that proximate, a knife, because by the time you get the spray on the person and the spray begins to take an effect, and by the way, people sprayed, even if it has a blinding effect, they know where you're standing. They can just charge you with the knife, even if they're blinded, and start stabbing you with the knife. So if you're spraying, stop moving backward in a straight direction like you were before. Make sure you move off the X, right? Make yourself a more difficult target. But here, the spray took effect pretty much instantly, but that's not always the case, folks. It's arguably, it's not even often the case. Pepper spray is more appropriate as a defensive tool when when the threat against you is also non-deadly force, or a deadly force threat that maybe is not quite imminent yet. So you don't just want to go to deadly force yet. You don't feel the circumstances warrant deadly defensive force yet. But if someone's trying to punch you, someone's threatening to, knock you down, maybe the gun's not the appropriate response, but pepper spray would be an appropriate response there. Here with the knife, I don't think I'd be going to my pepper spray. I don't think it's the right tactical decision. And I think the knife threat meets the legal requirements for my use of deadly defensive force. Now, often what happens, of course, is the defender presents a gun and that ends the fight. The bad guy realizes he brought a knife to a gunfight, and you never end up actually having to fire the shot. That doesn't mean you couldn't potentially be facing criminal charges anyway, like aggravated assault with a deadly weapon for having presented the gun and pointed it at someone, right? The other dude may well call the cops and say, hey, that lunatic pointed a gun at me. He's not going to say because I was waving a knife at him, right? And on camera, or there's witnesses, maybe the witnesses didn't see the other guy's knife, but they saw your gun. So there's always legal risk, right? You have to balance that against winning the physical fight, being in a position to win the physical fight. And of course, you can't count on the presentation of the gun ending the fight. A lot of bad guys don't care about your gun. A lot of bad guys have been shot before. They've been shot with pistols and they're still here. So they're often not that intimidated, especially if they perceive from your demeanor that maybe you're not intent on using it. So I caution, if the gun comes out and you don't need to shoot, you make that assessment. Well, you're probably better off not shooting. Don't be shooting people when you don't need to. It creates a lot of risk for you, legal and physical risk. But you have to be prepared. If the circumstances were such that bringing the gun out was appropriate, for me personally, my gun's not coming out unless I believe I would be privileged to actually fire the shot. I'm not a fan of defensive displays of guns. But when the gun's coming out, I believe all the conditions for deadly defensive force have been met. And then something changes. The person stops pursuing, the person drops the knife, whatever. And I have time to perceive that change such that they're no longer an imminent deadly force threat and process that information such that I feel I no longer need to use deadly defensive force. Well, I'm not going to use deadly defensive force if I no longer feel I need to. And of course, when you use OC spray, I'll show it again, but it makes, it comes in a variety of forms in terms of how it's dispersed, right? There's foam OC that sticks to people. There's stream OC spray, pepper spray, that is just, as you might imagine, a narrow stream. So it's easy to aim with precision. And then there's kind of a fog, a cloud OC spray. This one looks like the cloud variant. Let me, we can see it right here. Right? It's not a narrow stream. It's a pretty good cloud. It's not the foam. And there's nothing wrong with any of these choices, but they're different choices. They have different optimal use cases. So for example, well, we see the cloud here, right? When you spray the cloud variant, the cloud goes everywhere. If you're inside a building, it gets into the ventilation system and the whole building is now exposed to pepper spray. Even very large buildings, you'll find you can't stay in the building because the pepper spray was dispensed through the ventilation system. Now, that leads some, like if you go to a hospital, security guards in hospitals will typically use the gel pepper spray. The gel actually sticks to the person's skin, and the pepper component, the capsaicin, is in the gel. So it's not widely dispersed. And that's great in a hospital setting because you don't want the fog form to get into the ventilation and expose every patient in the hospital to OC spray, right? That would be bad. The downside of the gel is it delays how it extends the time it takes for the pepper spray to take effect, because the heat portion, the capsaicin, has to work its way through the gel. So there's a delayed response. That's the trade-off you're getting with the gel. Then we have the stream version, which doesn't create this cloud and allows for further dispersion. So it reaches out more with more precision. But that's great if you're facing like a single attacker like this. But what if it was a crowd of people? If it's a crowd of people, the stream, you're not going to be able to hit everybody with the stream because the others will start taking defensive action after you stream the first person. If you have the cloud, you just make a cloud. You could be making that cloud over your shoulder as you're running away, and now they have to run through a cloud of spray, right? So you can see there's advantages and disadvantages to each. The big problem with the cloud, especially outside, if there's any wind at all, and you're at all downwind of this dispersion, you're getting in the cloud of pepper spray too. So you should, and just imagine you're in a car or some enclosed space. You're getting pepper sprayed too. So something to think about. Take a pepper spray course, folks, a quality pepper spray course. There are right and wrong ways to use pepper spray for sure. All right, back to the comments. Yeah, the guy throwing, there's a video out there on the internet now of some dude throwing large rocks through houses. I covered that in yesterday's show, folks. So yeah, take a look at that. Let's see. Do I recommend OC spray with a marking dye? I don't have strong feelings one way or the other. I don't have a high expectation. I think the person I sprayed is either still going to be there when the cops show up or they're not. And if they're not, the cops aren't going to go randomly around the community putting a black light on people looking for a marking spray. Not unless there's been a death involved as well. If you pepper spray the guy and he kills you, yeah, maybe they'll look for that, but it's not really a problem for you anymore. Ray says, interesting that in some countries you're not allowed to carry OC spray. I think in most Western countries you're not. You're not in Canada, probably not in England. So don't live in those places if you care about defending yourself. Let's see. D says, we carried Sabre Red on duty. I like the Sabre products. I do carry POM, P-O-M, pepper spray today. But I carried Sabre for many years. I think I might even have... yeah, so I still have the canister in my desk. Sabre. It's good stuff. It's good. It's POM is just it's just a little easier to carry. It's a smaller container. Here, I can hold them up for you. So here's the, let me close this so we can get a larger image of me. So here's the Sabre, and here's the POM. I guess it's not really that much smaller. It's a little thinner. Both are high quality OC products. Let's see. We carried saber red on duty. The shooting range I used to belong to had an NRA Ladies' Day where we would demo spray our. Oh, by the way, one thing I like about Palm is you can buy canisters that just spray a liquid that's not pepper spray. So if you buy these things for your wife or your kids, you can have them practice actually spraying the containers without putting pepper spray all over the environment. So that's something to think about. Our volunteer victim could still operate for 30 seconds or so before incapacitation. Surprised the ladies who were told OC was the hammer of Thor. Yeah, so I was an OC instructor briefly long ago, and I had to get sprayed as part of being an instructor. And I have to say, folks, it was super uncomfortable for me. But if I'd had to fight through it, I could have fought through it. If someone was trying to kidnap one of my children from my presence and pepper sprayed me first, I'd be able to fight through that. So it's really a discomfort factor. You're trying to dissuade people, convince them through the burning to stop doing what they're doing. That's, you feel is dangerous, but it's definitely not the hammer of Thor. I mean, listen, shooting people doesn't often stop them. Shooting them with a handgun, at least. So let's see. Yeah, D says, our aggressor would describe the effects to the ladies of the pepper spray. And when he was finished with that, I would walk up, place hands on him, like to make an arrest. And at that point, he would draw a knife and, a fake knife and assault me to demonstrate he was still a threat. Yeah, if you pepper spray someone, you got to leave. Folks, you need to leave the area, if at all possible, because they're still a threat. They're just a hopefully diminished threat. Yeah, jujitsu, and I'm a student of jujitsu, folks. It's I think it's a great self-defense art, but it's not intended really to fight someone with a knife. I mean, there are techniques in jujitsu for doing that, but if there's a knife out and and you have the option to run away, that's the smart play, rather than going hands-on. If you can do that consistent with your own safety and the safety the safety of anybody you have a legal duty to protect. Okay, so those are all the member comments. Let's get on to the next video here. This one is hard to watch, folks. Nobody dies in this one, but it's a rather vicious assault on a woman and a little girl. Now, this happened in France, but again, for our purposes, we're going to presume this happened in the U.S. But they're tossed around like rag dolls by this aggressor. Happens to be, I believe, an African immigrant to France. I believe this is in Bordeaux. But it's pretty violent, and it's a lot of violence in a very compressed time frame. The whole video, from nothing happening to vicious assault, is about 30 seconds, folks. And this is in the threshold of the victim's home, which is how we're going to evaluate this use of force. Now, again, this is in France, so guns for defense just aren't realistic option there, but we're going to do our analysis from the perspective of this is in America. In fact, I kind of randomly picked a state, Oklahoma, and we can look at Oklahoma law that would apply to this kind of defensive situation. Obviously, I can't cover 50 states simultaneously, so I have to pick one as a exemplar of how U.S. law would apply in this kind of situation. I chose Oklahoma, but let's go ahead. Yeah, it's a pretty traumatic video and could have gone much worse than it did. Neither the woman nor child were, they certainly weren't killed. I don't believe they were seriously harmed here, but it could have gone much worse. So let's take a look. Here we go. So they're just standing in the doorway of their home, partially open door, looking down the street. And behind them, we'll see the nice Algerian gentleman. Notice them. Okay, here we go. There's the Algerian gentleman in the background. He notices them. She notices him. Let's go inside. But look at this. He puts his foot in the doorway. They can't close the door, and now he's in. He's grabbing him. He literally drags him out of the house, throws him on the street, the little girl too. Drags the little girl, throws her away. Is he going to grab her and take her? Looked like it for a second, right? Why do that at all? The woman's on the ground. She's helpless. to protect that little girl. And of course, the little girl is obviously helpless. He just picked her up. I would note for all the dog lovers, the dog here didn't do anything. Not saying every dog would do nothing, but like OC spray, dogs are not magic either. So how would this work in a US context? This guy coming, not doing anything yet, really, right? But that all changes here. The moment he begins to enter that home, and especially when he forces his way through the doorway. What do we have now? We have a home, which is highly defensible property. Many states have special legal provisions that provide broader privilege to use deadly force in defense of highly defensible property, like a home or a business or an occupied vehicle. And a typical condition for that special provision, broader license to use deadly force than you would have had if you were just out in the street, out in public, is typically a forcible and unlawful entry. What do we have here? We have a forcible and unlawful entry. By the way, another common condition is that someone's being removed unlawfully from the highly defensible property. We have that happen here too, right? They are being removed. Man, just dragged both of them right out of the house. They are being removed. So that would be another trigger. So let's take a look at the actual Oklahoma law here, defensive property. This is from, by the way, we have state-specific self-defense law courses for each of the 50 states. The way we do this is we have like a full day law of self-defense advanced course that covers all the generalized legal principles of self-defense, which are pretty common across the 50 states, about 80% the same across the 50 states. But of course, the 20% difference can make the difference between conviction and acquittal. So you need to know your state-specific law too. And we do that through a 1 to 2 hour course for each state that's specific to each state. This is from our Oklahoma course. By the way, if you take advantage of this platinum opportunity, you get your choice of any 3 states, state-specific laws. That's part of that package of courses. You get that both in DVD form and instant online access form for any 3 states. You choose the states. That alone would be $600 if you purchased it normally. And you're getting it as part of this package for the 82 cents a day. So pretty good deal, I think. All right, back to Oklahoma. So how would Oklahoma treat this scenario? What would that woman be privileged to do in defending against this forcible and unlawful intrusion into her highly defensible property? So we have, what does Oklahoma define as highly defensible property? Dwellings, residences, places of business, and occupied vehicles. Under Oklahoma law, these are all classified as highly defensible property that get this special legal dispensation for the use of deadly force where it might not otherwise be permitted if you were just out in public. So let's take a look at the Oklahoma highly defensible property statute. Oklahoma uses lots of numbers in their statutes. 21-1289.25, physical or deadly force against an intruder. First, it defines highly defensible property. But we already covered that, so I won't dwell on that. Then we get to the special provisions for the use of deadly force in defense of highly defensible property. They have just kind of a notice that they recognize the citizens of the state of Oklahoma have a right to expect absolute safety within their highly defensible property. And then they get to the special provision. And the special provision is a legal presumption that the defender had a reasonable fear of imminent, unlawful, deadly force harm. I'll just read the language here. A person or owner, manager, or employee of a business is legally presumed to have held a reasonable fear of imminent peril of death or great bodily harm to himself or another when using defensive force. Now, 1, 2, 3. Reasonable, that's the element of reasonableness. Death or great bodily harm, that's proportionality, that you're facing a deadly force threat. And of course, they mention imminent peril. That's the element of imminence. It's legally presuming 3 of the 5 elements needed for self-defense. The fourth element wouldn't apply anyway because Oklahoma is a stand your ground state. So that's 4 of the 5 elements. And even if it was a duty to retreat state, if you're in your home, the castle doctrine nevertheless relieves you of an otherwise existing legal duty to retreat. So now we have 4 of the 5 elements of self-defense are covered: imminence, proportionality, avoidance, and reasonableness. The only one left is innocence, but innocence is kind of baked into the cake, right? If there's a forcible, unlawful intrusion into your home. So really, this law gives you every condition you need to justify your use of deadly defensive force, legally presumed to be in place. Pretty good, right? But there are conditions that have to be met. So one of the conditions is that the person against whom you're using the force is in the process of unlawfully and forcefully entering. Well, is that happening in our video? Absolutely, right? He's physically forcing himself through the doorway, and he's obviously doing it without license. It's an unlawful entrance. An alternative condition would be that the person you're using the force against had removed or was attempting to remove another against the will of that other from the dwelling. Is that happening in our video? It sure is. That's exactly what's happening. Here we have the forceful entry, and a moment later, the removal of the persons against their will. Forceful entry, removal. So both of these would satisfy the Oklahoma requirements, triggering this legal presumption that gives you all these elements you need for deadly defensive force. And you also, another condition is that you have to have known that the conditions were met at the time you used the deadly defensive force. Obviously, that would be the case here. Then there are exclusions that would not qualify you for this legal presumption, even if those conditions are met, even if it's an unlawful enforceable entry. None of them would apply here. So I'm going to skip over those for the interest of time. There's also a second legal presumption. So the first one I just described is a legal presumption, the one addressing the elements of the defender's state of mind, right? That the defender, it's legally presumed the defender had a reasonable fear of imminent deadly force harm. There's a second legal presumption that goes to the intruder's state of mind. And this is it here. A person who unlawfully and by force enters a dwelling is presumed to be doing so with the intent to commit an unlawful act involving force or violence. Of course, here the actual force or violence actually occurred. Now, did he inflict death or serious bodily injury on these people? Let's assume not. So if he didn't, would deadly defensive force be permissible? If he just did this out in the street, if the highly defensible property was not a factor here? Well, maybe, but you'd have to make the argument that he was about to inflict death or serious bodily injury. If he just walked away at this point, that eminence goes away too. But in the context of the highly defensible property, you don't need to worry about whether or not he was actually reasonably threatening death or serious bodily injury. It's presumed that he was because of his forcible and unlawful intrusion into the property. Now, it's France. This woman wouldn't have a gun. In America, she could have a gun. In Oklahoma, she could damn well have a gun, especially in her home. But it's not going to help her if the gun is, let me change that so we're not looking at the poor lady's skirt. There we go. In Oklahoma, sorry, the gun's not going to help her, even in Oklahoma, if it's in a gun safe or a drawer, right? The gun needs to be on your person for this kind of threat. Do you get to choose the time, manner, and place of attack of the aggressor? No, the aggressor gets to choose. So I don't tell people what to do. You want to go about your home unarmed, that's up to you. But I can tell you, I personally, I carry a gun when I go about in public. I carry that gun when I'm home. I mean, I forget it's on my person. It's so convenient and comfortable to carry. Got to pat myself, make sure it's still there. Thankfully, it always is. But if I'm home, I'm armed. The only time the gun's not on my person really is when I'm asleep or in the shower. And then there's a lockbox right there. So something to think about. Okay, let me take a look at the comments and questions. Again, we only look at the comments and questions from our Law of Self-Defense members. So you need to be a Law of Self-Defense member, which you could do for 99 cents, 2-week trial, 30 cents a day after that if you stay a member at lawofselfdefense.com/trial. And you'll get instant directions for accessing this live stream on the member dashboard, where you can put your questions and such in the chat. Let's see. Kyle says, an idiot DPD, might be Denver Police Department, I'm not sure, hosed down a bad guy, himself and me, in a small house. I had to fight for the cop because he took himself out. Yeah, when pepper spray goes, folks, everybody gets sprayed. Even if you're not getting the spray directly, if you're like a cop and you have to spray the suspect and then go hands-on to make an arrest, it gets everywhere. It gets all over your hands, your clothes. It's noxious. Let's see. Eric says, finally a platinum member. Thank you, Eric. That is much appreciated. Again, all of you can become platinum members for just 82 cents a day at lawofselfdefense.com/82 cents. Do it now. Get that big box of stuff, all those DVDs, all those books. Dimitri says, Andrew, I recently became an LTC carrier in Massachusetts. Yes, that's a license to carry. That's what I had in Massachusetts for 25 years when I lived there. In the event of a similar knife attack, what if the brandishing of the weapon was enough to get the knife attacker to run? I would have to contact police regarding the incident. Should I admit that I brandished a weapon? Well, you don't have to contact police, but you run a danger if you don't. I mean, I've seen cases where, much like this happened. A gun is brandished, shots not fired, bad guy runs away, and the gun owner, licensed to carry, acting completely lawfully, decides, well, I don't want the hassle of dealing with the police. You would think the bad guy would not call the cops, but they do call the cops. They call them all the time. And they don't say the guy pointed a gun at me because I was trying to commit an armed robbery of him. They just say, hey, this lunatic pointed a gun at me. And he got your license plate because he saw your car. And so he gave that to the cops. And that night you're having dinner and the cops show up at your house and arrest you for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Because that dude was the complainant. You're the respondent because you never called the cops. So I'm not telling you to do or not do anything in particular. I just want you to make informed decisions. You don't have to call the police, but if you don't call the police and the other guy does, it looks bad for you. Because of course the other guy's not going to tell an honest story about what happened, right? And you shouldn't admit anything to the police, nothing specific. If you want to say in a generalized sense, I had to act in self-defense without getting any more specific than that, not I brandished a gun. I mean, just think about that phrase, right? So brandishing a gun is a crime by itself that you would now have to justify as self-defense. I mean, the legal term for the crime is the word brandishing, and now you're using the word brandishing. If you'd said I had to draw my gun, well, drawing a gun might be brandishing or might not be brandishing. It depends on the circumstances. It depends on the manner of the presentation. Depends on whether you put the muzzle on the guy. So anytime you get into anything more than the most general information, you run the risks of actually implicating yourself in a crime. The prosecutor is going to say, well, he confessed. We have it on the body cam. He himself said he brandished. That's a crime. So when we do our full day advanced class, or if you get the full, the DVD or the online streamed version of the advanced class, which you would get as part of this platinum offer, lawofselfdefense.com/82 cents, of that 6 or 7 hours, we spend almost an hour of it is focused just on the subtleties of interacting with the police in a use of force event. And it's not just a matter of say nothing, folks. It's more complicated than that. So, something to think about. Tony asks, will platinum members have access to all 50 states law on our dashboard? Not all. Oh, I see. Yeah, not the state-specific courses. So we have the statutes and court decisions for all 50 states in our database at Law of Self-Defense. And I think we've long made available to our members the statutes and jury instructions and court decisions, use of force court decisions for their particular state. We're working on making those laws available to members, all 50 states. So they're not limited to one particular state. We don't have that in effect yet, folks. We're a small organization, but we're working on it. That's on our to-do list. Bruce says, it's amazing how quick ambushes happen. Yeah, it's in an instant, right? In this video. It is in instant. I mean, the whole video is only 32 seconds from beginning to end. The time from when this is when he makes his attack, right? His foot goes in the doorway. Now, this is now unambiguous. He's not merely going to ask them for change. He's intruding into their home and preventing them from closing the door. That's why his foot is there, right? 14 seconds, and they're on the street 21 seconds. So that's 7 seconds, folks. It's not a lot of time. And they're at this point, they're helpless, right? What if this dude had grabbed this little girl and just kept going? What would that woman have done to prevent that? Nothing. She would have been able to do nothing. And how would that have worked out? Dave says, one case where a camera-mounted unit saves the day is when a criminal calls law enforcement after you stop them from attacking you by bringing the gun to bear, causing the attacker to flee. Oh, that scenario where you're dealing with an aggressor. The conditions are appropriate for you to present your gun. You do that. They run and they call the police to complain about you. If you had that entire exchange caught on camera, that would be good for you. Some people like to have a camera on their, maybe you can get them like to mount on your gun. You could have your own body camera, I guess. To me, it seems unwieldy, but the camera footage is good for you if you did things right. It's bad for you if you did things wrong. So don't do things wrong. Be in a position where more evidence is good for you because you did it right. Okay, next video. This one's about 1.5 minutes long, and this one's going to be kind of quick. I'm not going to do a detailed breakdown here, but it ties into a show we did just last week. And I think it would be, for many of you, I think it provides an opportunity to kind of be a lawyer for a day. Do the kind of thing that lawyers do. And I'll illustrate what I mean. So what we're going to see here is this guy's, we have a work crew. Obviously, they're working in this area with the chain link fence and the orange vest and all that. This is one of the workers. There's a number of them. And we have a black man here who's very upset because the workers started making noise too early in the day. They're not supposed to make noise until, I forget, 8 o'clock a.m., and they started at 6 o'clock a.m., and the black man here is all upset because this has been going on for a while. It's been a problem. He's really upset about it. And he has a gun in his hand. So the black man came to this angry discussion, initiated this angry discussion with a pistol in his hand, plainly visible. So let's take a look at the video, and then we'll discuss the prudence of that and the implications for under use of force law.
I'm going to call the city. I'm calling the city.
All right. I do have to caution, there's a lot of cursing. I think I bleeped it all out, so there's a lot of bleeps. But I'm from New York City, folks, and I'm kind of deaf to cursing. I don't even notice it. So it's always possible I missed an F word or whatever. If you're sensitive to that, I apologize. I did my best to bleep them all out. Let me start it again here.
I'm going to call the city. I'm calling the city. I got the email and the paperwork right here. Y'all are not supposed to start before 8 o'clock on Saturday, per city ordinance. We're pulling the paperwork up right now. You do some blasting music at 6 o'clock in the morning right in front of my house. No, it was not. No, it was not. I know it's time you woke me up. I don't give a shit what you got. I know what time you woke me up.
I missed one. Sorry.
I will be calling the city because per ordinance, y'all are not supposed to start early on Saturday.
Do whatever you want.
I will. Come around and see what I do to you. I'm not playing with y'all no more. We tried to be nice. Y'all park all in front of our house, leaning dirty in our house up. We're sick of this.
Who's parking there?
You people that had to park. All you guys leaning up against the house. I had to pressure wash the whole house because of y'all. Yes. When they working her up.
Look, there's a GC office right there. You can go and complain.
Because he knows good well y'all ass ain't supposed to be out here.
Complain to them. They
We're
gotta
sick
come
and
to
tired of
us.
being woke
There's
up
a
to this
process.
bullshit
It's
every
not.
morning.
And there's a way you have to come out with a gun.
Yes, because I already told you to stop blasting it 2 hours ago.
For music,
If you're gonna get it out, you have to use it.
Makes a lot of sense.
Bring your ass to this side of the street again.
Yes, sir. You have a wonderful day.
Still standing around.
All right, so that's all of that. At the end there, you hear one of the workers say, is there a reason you have to come out here with a gun? And then he says, if you're going to bring it out, you have to use it. The worker says, right? So why bring the gun? Why bring the gun in your hand? Now, I mean, I would have brought a gun too, but only because I'm always bringing a gun. I wear a gun on my person. So if you see me, I probably have a gun on me, unless I'm in some place where it's not permissible by law. But what I wouldn't do, even if I was angry about having a conversation, is have the gun in my hand. What does having the gun in your hand do? Well, it provides an opportunity for a prosecutor to argue effectively that you're possessing the gun, displaying the gun in an effort to change someone else's behavior, to scare them. Well, that's the definition of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. In most jurisdictions, that's a 10 to 20-year felony once they add in the gun sentencing enhancement. So it's very serious prison time. I work a lot of aggravated assault with weapons cases because it's not uncommon for people to point a gun, not fire a shot in a self-defense type of situation. That's what they end up charged with. And they're looking at spending a decade or more in prison if they're charged. And no one knows what really happened, right? No one judging your use of force after the fact knows what really happened. But there's not a lot of good reasons for going to an argument like this with a gun in hand, as opposed to under the shirt. If you're worried that the workers are going to turn violent, sure, have a gun on your person, but you don't need to have it in your hand. And is there a risk that it simply provokes an escalation to violence? I mean, we heard the worker, hey, if you're going to bring a gun, you have to use it. Well, that's not true, but that's kind of obviously that's leading to an escalation of the confrontation because the workers don't want to, everyone has an ego, right? Presumably the black guy comes out with a gun in his hand because he's trying to be intimidating. Well, no other man wants to look like he was intimidated, right? So egos come into play, things escalate. Now you are engaged in a deadly force fight. So just very imprudent. Why do you need a gun in your hand to complain about a noise violation? I understand being upset. I get it. But this was imprudent and opens up this dude to a very serious felony charge. Indeed. Now, what I wanted to do was actually juxtapose this with a show we just did last week, June 12th, involving a case out of Florida, a Florida State Supreme Court decision, where a homeowner had workers outside his house cutting down trees. They got into a verbal confrontation, and the homeowner went into his house, came back out with a gun, cycling the slide. And he was criminally charged, demanded a self-defense immunity hearing, claiming it was self-defense, what he did. Under Florida law, you can get a pre-trial self-defense immunity hearing. He was denied immunity by the trial court, who said his conduct was overly aggressive in the circumstances, not self-defense. He appealed that denial of immunity, and the Florida Supreme Court reversed the trial court. So that's a case where a dude came out of his house with a gun in his hand, even cycling the slide, clearly intended to be intimidating conduct, right? We see that in the movies all the time. And the Florida Supreme Court decided as a matter of law, that could not be aggravated assault for a number of factors. Now, the reason I wanted to share this with all of you, and by the way, so this is the blog post. Again, if you're a law self-defense member, you get the transcript At the bottom and in the transcript is a link to the Florida Supreme Court decision. So you can read the actual decision. You can also download the PDF form of the transcript for your records. But what I would encourage you to do is read the actual decision. Read the Florida Supreme Court decision saying a homeowner coming out with a gun is, by law, is not engaged in aggravated assault, and see how it would apply to this video that we just watched. Because there are different facts here. In the Florida case, we have the fact that the person who came out with the gun, who was charged, remained on his own property. That was an important fact for the Florida Supreme Court. Here, the homeowner comes out in the street. But is it any less lawful for him to be on the street with the gun? Doesn't he have the same privilege of self-defense? I mean, let's imagine this worker dispute happened in Florida, and the person has a concealed carry permit. So in terms of possession of the gun, it's no different. The law is no different than if he were in his yard or out in the street if he's got a concealed carry permit. But would the fact that he's on the street change the analysis of the Florida Supreme Court? Because they spent a lot of time talking in that decision about how their guy was a homeowner on his own property. So if you want to do the kind of thing that lawyers do, we would take a piece of case law, the Florida Supreme Court decision, and we would apply it to the different facts of a different case and see whether we can argue it's consistent, you should have the same legal outcome, or whether this new case, this guy with the workers, can be distinguished from the facts of the Florida Supreme Court decision, and therefore that outcome should not apply here. So just an exercise for those of you who would like a higher level understanding, skill set in understanding use of force law. You have that opportunity. Take this show from last week, just the 12th, and apply it to the facts of this worker video case, and see if you come to a different conclusion. I would encourage you to argue both sides. You know, build the mental argument that the Florida Supreme Court decision would apply here too. The outcome would be the same. And then alternatively, build the argument that it's distinguishable, that it should be a different outcome. Okay. And this is just what the PDF download of the transcript looks like. So it also has the link to the court decision. All right. All right, those folks, those are the three. Let's see, do I have let me look at questions now from this third video. Yeah, I'm still streaming. I'm going to shut off YouTube now. It's the last, that was video 3. The first 3 videos are open access. The next 2 videos are the shooting ones. And we're going to stop the open access stream there. Oh, no, Steve Gosney's in the chat. Sorry, I keep saying this is a Florida Supreme Court decision. It was a Court of Appeals decision. Sorry, Steve, thanks for the correction. I appreciate that. Let's see. Yeah, and let's see. Hopefully I have it right. So I do have it right in the actual documentation. So Florida Court of Appeals. And also here, Florida Appeals, not the Florida Supreme Court. That's just a brain fart on my part. All right, so those are the 3 videos we were doing open access today. We have 2 more videos, actual shooting videos. We're not going to do a lot of detailed legal analysis on these because they're pretty straightforward. They're gunfights in stores, basically stores, restaurants. But there are important tactical aspects of these shootings that I think you need to document. So you'll definitely, if you're a law self-defense member, please, when you get to the members only replay of today's show, download that PDF, make notes on it. Make sure you note what we're going to talk about in just a moment, because in particular, what you'll want to note will play a huge role in justifying you if you have to fire a bunch of shots in self-defense. You know, 1 or 2 shots in self-defense may not be an easy sell, but you shoot 4, 5, 6, 7 times, it gets harder to justify. The law says you can continue shooting as long as you're facing that imminent deadly force threat. But no one knows if you were really still facing it when you fired shots 6, 7, 8, and 9. But you may need to fire 6, 7, 8, or 9, right? Why? Why would you still need to? Well, because the threat may still be present. But to a jury, if the prosecutor says to the jury, hey, listen, any of us could understand having to shoot someone 4 times in self-defense, but 8 times in self-defense, that can't be self-defense. So the next 2 videos are going to help document, illustrate for your record so you could get this kind of information admitted to the jury. That's why we're documenting all this. This is why you download those PDFs of the transcripts to be able to document so you can get this specialized knowledge in front of the jury to explain to them, to demonstrate to them that your decisions, your perceptions, your actions in self-defense were reasonable because you possessed this specialized knowledge. That's what we're going to do next. And if you're not yet a Law of Self-Defense member, and you could you could do this for 99 cents, folks. 99 cents. If it's not worth 99 cents, I don't even know why it's worth your time. So I would encourage you, lawofselfdefense.com/trial. Sign up for our 2-week trial, just 99 cents. And if you stay a member after that, it's only 30 cents a day, folks. That's it. 30 cents a day. It's just not a lot of money. Less than $10 a month to be a standard member of Law of Self-Defense. All right. So with that out of the way, I will begin to shut down the open access stream. YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, you are about to go away. If you're a Law of Self-Defense member, don't go anywhere. The show is continuing for you. We're going to play our little extra video, but we're coming back for the Law of Self-Defense members. I just play the extra video so the video editors can tell when to cut off the open access stuff. So here we go. YouTube, thanks for joining us. I hope to see you again real soon. Take care. Bye-bye.